I'm Nate Cooper, founder and managing partner at Barrel Ventures. And I'm panicked about our planet.
Canute!
How,
What is happening?
Nothing much at all. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. We have an in-studio guest.
Yes, we do.
So it's not like, do we say, let's get him on the phone?
No, we're not going to do the ring thing.
But this intern milling around, what do you think of Ethan in here?
I think Ethan is...
He's not gotten on anybody's nerves yet.
No, not yet.
It's the longest running intern at Social Leverage.
The first one lasted about 5 minutes. Gone.
Well, the first one didn't know that he was an experiment. We gave him COVID and fired him. He came in, we just rubbed him, and then we sent him on his way.
Yeah.
And so, in-studio guest. It's our second in-studio guest. He's here golfing. No, he's here with his family and friends of our family, the Coopers. Nate Cooper's here.
All right.
Say hello, Nate.
Hey, hey.
Hey, hey. All right, now, Nate's worried about the planet, so I don't even know if we should do this show. Because you and I could give a fuck about the planet.
You can't.
And surprisingly, it's from Chicago. Why do people in Chicago care? Are you the only person in Chicago who cares about the planet?
I don't think most people do. It was less about the planet and more about the stupidity of humans.
Yes. Well, that we get along with. As someone who founded StockTwits, people email me all the time, go, how do you deal with all the idiots on StockTwits? I go, idiots? That's the internet.
I think the two most common lines I say to entrepreneurs is people aren't as smart as we think, and they're also not as dumb as we think. So they're somewhere in the middle.
Yes. So you're down here visiting from Chicago. There is a lot of Chicago people in Arizona. When was the first time? What was the reasoning you guys came down here?
My cousins moved out here 30 years ago, before the 101 existed, and we started coming out here for spring break then, and have come ever since.
It's a Chicago town.
It's a Chicago town. You got Portillo's, you got Lou's.
You've got the Blackhawks get more fans than the Coyotes. The Cubs get more fans than the Diamondbacks. And the Bears get more fans than the Cardinals, they call them?
Yeah.
Is that true? Like, have you ever come down? You're not a big enough fan.
I haven't come down for a Bears game, but I've gone to spring training. It's a blast. I mean, also, why wouldn't you want to leave Chicago in the middle of winter?
So were you born when Jordan was in his prime?
I was around when Jordan was in his prime.
How old were you?
I was, by the end of it, 12.
And so that was like a key age.
Yeah.
So 6 to 12 was like Jordan.
Yeah.
And was
so
it just
LeBron
like
has
that?
no comparison to Jordan.
In terms of like what his effect on a city and kids and the nation?
He was Chicago.
He was Chicago.
And I think he's still, if you go to any country around the world and you say Chicago, no matter what language they'll say, oh, Michael Jordan, Chicago Bulls.
And is it like Lance Armstrong, even though we know Michael's a douche, that in Chicago they love him no matter what?
Yeah.
No, I don't know if Michael's a douche.
Michael Jordan is God in Chicago.
So my son, this is a funny story. There's a picture of Max. He was playing at San Diego. Have you met him?
Yeah. We
Not
play
my
golf
son,
together.
but no, I'm talking about Michael Jordan.
Oh. Michael Jordan and I
This
did
is what
not
he
play
said.
golf
He said
together.
people aren't as dumb as they normally are or smart. So have you met Michael?
Michael, so I did my bachelor party in the Bahamas,
Uh-huh.
and we went to a nightclub, and Michael Jordan was there with Ahmad Rashad.
Random.
Just randomly. And so I say that he was on my bachelor party. We made eye contact once or twice. So that's my experience meeting Michael Jordan.
That's not bad. He was there for an FTX conference in the 70s.
Big investor.
Yeah, pre-investing
In
in
the
the
70s.
FTX. Well, that's when your bachelor party was. When was your bachelor party? 7 years ago?
7 years ago, yeah, something like that.
So, Max, speaking of Jordan, I'm scared of people. Like, when there's a rumor about a person, I'm like, he's like a god. So he's playing at San Diego Country Club. There's a lot of athletes that play there in San Diego. And rumor is he's there. And Max is probably 11. So he's long retired. Everybody knows who Michael Jordan is. So he's making the turn. And I go, Max. This is like Instagram had just started. I go, Max, you're going to kill yourself if you don't go up to him and take a picture. And Max was like, he's a kid. He's like, okay. So he takes his phone over there, and Jordan's got a cigar, and I'm like, I think he's just going to kill Max, right? Because it's a private, like, Michael's there to not be bothered. And Max goes right up to him, and I'm like 100 yards away, and I see him, and I'm so scared that, like, and he gets a selfie with Jordan. And I'm sure Jordan wasn't happy. He smiled in the photo, but Max had his shot with
Max
Jay.
is going to be a great investor one day just because he has absolutely no shame of getting in contact with people.
Right. He probably texts you.
Yeah.
He is Max Homa. He's caddied for Max. He's played with Max Homa. So Max assumes they're best friends. So Max will text him and goes, have a good round today. And I go, Max, you can't, just because you have his phone number doesn't mean you're allowed to text. He'll do the same thing with Xander. He ran into Xander, gets his phone number, and then texts him all the time.
Amazing.
And so,
So cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool because Max was a shy kid. So anyway, so you are down here for Silverleaf. I think it's the center of the golf universe right now. We have Homa, we have Rom, we have Finau.
Yeah.
And they're there pretty much every day.
It's just fun to see him practice. It's rare to get to see sort of masters of the world at their work.
Yeah.
It's kind of like watching you
It's
invest
really-
in fintech.
It's like you hear a sound from these guys. First of all, they huddle together, so they're all friendly.
Yeah.
Which is nice. They speak the same language of purity of golf. And the sounds that come off the ground when they hit a ball as fans of golf, it's just it's not even fun. I quit on you. I didn't even show up the other day. I was supposed to play with Nate, and I was just like, the weather wasn't perfect. I'm like, I don't like golf enough to spend 5 hours.
I've got a rule: if it's under 40 degrees, I'm not going out
Well,
there.
compared to Chicago, it was a good day for you.
Yeah.
For me,
It was
it wasn't a good day. So Nate and I have all this stuff in common. You knew me on Twitter, I guess?
We met on Twitter, and then we got introduced through a mutual friend, and then we've become pals.
And so Nate's dad is a member also at Silverleaf. He's a wild man. So tell quickly people about he's a classic entrepreneur pre-internet.
Yeah, so my father and grandfather started a business selling fresh-cut potatoes to Chicago hot dog stands in the 80s.
That's amazing.
That's amazing, right? It's old school.
As dirty as it sounds. And then one day, one of the large chains called and said, hey, can you guys do onions? They didn't know what an onion was, but said, of course. Literally, I think they dried their first batch of onions in a coin-operated clothes dryer. And when they sold the business 20-something years ago, they were shipping close to 4 million pounds of produce a week.
Chicago has got all these people that like do all. It's not just trading. It's real estate. It's manufacturing. It's produce.
Chicago's the home of, like, unsexy businesses.
And big money. Yeah, I mean, Chicago is the flyover. It's part of the flyover state, but it is the one state that used to not get flyover. What do you think since COVID? Like, is it become less relevant in COVID? It feels like no one brings up Chicago.
I think you're sort of fighting this internal battle. You know, there's crime in the city. It's not as bad as everyone says. Chicago's always going to be a major hub because of transportation and logistics and supply chain and
wealth.
You know, we talk a lot over the last few years about people are building solutions for problems that don't exist, right? The ideas that come out of Chicago usually tend to be tangible ideas that are solving real problems that need to be solved.
Mm-hmm.
And the valuations tend to be much more realistic. I was having a conversation today about, you know, a Midwest Series A versus a coastal, you know, pre-seed.
Right.
It's a similar valuation.
Yeah.
And so I think Chicagoans tend to solve real, tangible problems that need to be solved.
So you're an entrepreneur yourself, but when did you get the investing bug?
So I was an entrepreneur for about a dozen years. Helped start a restaurant chain. Decided that if I grew up in food. Started a restaurant chain 13 or so years ago. Came to the conclusion that if I spent another day in food, I was going to have a nervous breakdown. Decided to go back to
Just because
business
there's
school.
it never stops?
You know, the thing about restaurants, it's one of those things that from the outside it looks a lot sexier than it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Restaurants, you know, most other businesses, you can build on the success that you had the previous day,
Mm-hmm.
right? And, you know, you get to...
You start over.
You start over. You're on stage every single day, and nobody cares what you guys did yesterday or the year before or the month before. If you mess up one time, someone's, you know, probably not going to come back. And so I decided to go back to business school, and of course started another food business, which was essentially if Lunchables and Blue Apron had a baby. I'm not sure why Kellogg let me graduate, because I was barely in
That
school.
was your idea during business school at
right
Kellogg?
before business school. Started it with,
Is Kellogg named after Kellogg's, the cereal, like the food brand?
I should know this. I think there's some connection.
There has to be.
And so built that business up while I was in school. We raised a bunch of venture money from top tier
did you?
firms across the country. Business kind of exploded overnight. Had about 40, 50 employees by the time I graduated. And then
Wow.
about 6, 7 years ago, we started having conversations with strategics and actually got a term sheet from one of the largest food companies in the world. I'm not going to name the name. And another top 5 food company in the world was going to invest. Went through 6 months of diligence, 60 days of legal back and forth, and 6 hours before funding, they pulled out of the deal and left us with a $500,000 legal bill and essentially bankrupted us, which was
Wow.
a harrowing experience.
And how old were you?
I was 30 at the time, I believe.
Okay.
It was about 6 months before we got married, so, going into my marriage unemployed. And
So you wound down Wise Apple?
wound on Wise Apple. It was obviously like your heart getting ripped out of you. In hindsight, probably the best thing that ever happened to me.
Because it might not have worked?
Not that it might not have worked. I think first off, the business would have exploded during COVID. And going into a manufacturing plant in the middle of COVID with an infant and newborn, not really what I would have wanted to been doing.
Got it.
And secondly, growing up, I was always the kid that when you asked me what I was good at in life, I didn't really have a word to describe it, right? And, being an entrepreneur, you're wearing a million different hats, and I loved it, and I enjoyed it, and I thought I was good at it, but I still didn't really find my niche. And now, being on the other side as an investor, I feel like I was born to do this. And so we wound on Wise Apple, started investing kind of, not full-time, figured out sort of what I wanted to do with my life. And like a lot of people, the first few checks we wrote, that I wrote, ended up being really successful and kind of parlayed that into where we are today.
And so Barrel Ventures, I'm an LP, but Barrel Ventures, I'm a personal LP. Barrel, just tell people about
Yeah,
Barrel.
so Barrel, how we sort of started, I had been investing on my own. And then about 2 years ago, some people reached out and said, hey, you built this track record investing throughout the food ecosystem. Would you ever consider raising outside capital? And my first response was no. Please lose my number. And I said that for a couple of reasons. The first reason was I have this perspective, I'm sure you share it, that if you're managing outside capital, you should have a firm belief that you're best in the world at something, right? Because if you don't, what are you doing? How are you going to get into deals? You're not going to be able to play in the right sandbox. You really can't advocate for yourselves to get on a cap table of competitive deals.
It's true.
And who was I to say, 4 years ago that doing this for years that I was best in the world at something? Started reflecting and talking to some of our, portfolio CEOs, where we had small investments in companies alongside tier 1 venture firms and multinational strategics, where they had tens of millions of dollars. And I get notes from the board members after the board meetings that said, hey, so-and-so XYZ gave you a heads up. She said you were her, most value-add investor. And, this happened multiple times. And so I said, okay, maybe we do have something unique, a unique perspective. Maybe we are good at this. The second thing was, I think the incentives in this world are messed up, right? Where managers are motivated by fees. How do you get more fees? You raise more money. How you raise more money? You show markups. And if we haven't learned anything over the past 18 months, it's that markups are essentially meaningless. Yes,
It actually
no.
can be dangerous.
Exactly. And so I said, okay, I'm not really motivated by fees. No desire to ever raise, massive fund where I say, hey, our investment period's 3 years, 11 months later, we're 95% deployed. That's not me. I'm sure you've seen that.
Yep.
And so I said, okay, if we could go out and raise a small fund, who could we raise it from to really level up that expertise? And the answer was, let's go raise it from a who's who of executives, family offices, corporates, sort of within the broader food ecosystem, where we can go to these entrepreneurs and companies, and at the end of the first call, they say, okay, what can I do to have you on my cap table? And that's kind of what we did. And I feel incredibly fortunate to be here today.
And I agree. I think what happened was free money. We're probably 2013 when we did our first fund. I never thought about it that way because I didn't have the mentorship. I was just kind of doing it because people trusted me. But yeah, looking back, like it is a little different than the stock market because the stock market now has indexing. You can't really index. Tiger tried to do it. You can't index the private markets. So you don't have to be the best in the world to beat an index that doesn't exist.
Or just have the belief that you're the best in the world.
Yeah.
Because you might not have to prove it with data, but if you don't believe that about yourself, like, how are you going to sell that to entrepreneurs?
You can't. And to truly, I tell a lot of the managers that we back is like, because we back them, because we like them, is they have to create value.
Yeah.
So at Social Leverage, it's always like, do we incubate something? Do we take a bigger piece of something that we believe in that no one else sees? So it's this weird look at the world, and that's where the alpha comes from. But I think what we've learned from the last 5 years, if you're just doing market price deals with Sequoia and Andreessen and Index and everybody else, you're going to get below market returns.
Yeah.
Especially since your money is illiquid. So we're going to have some terrible returns, in my opinion, in the venture world. So what is it about food? What's different about food going forward? First of all, it's a massive industry.
Yeah. So
what's exciting about food?
You throw a dart at a board of, anything across the food ecosystem. What I say is pre-farm to post-fork and everything in between. You throw a dart at a board and something is going to be broken in one of those places. And so, from a 10,000-foot view, the way we look at the world is our food ecosystem is incredibly broken, and there's truly a multi-trillion dollar opportunity to solve it, right? So you look at the future of packaging, right? Packaging alone,
Arizona footprint.
Packaging alone is $1 trillion industry. And you read any, Fortune 500 annual report, and they have a whole section devoted to packaging, right? Mm-hmm. We're committed to using...
So food is packaging,
yeah,
too.
We're committed to using less plastic. We're committed to using, lowering our greenhouse gases, right? So for an example, pallet wrap, shrink wrap. That is a $40 billion annual commodity that is all petroleum-based.
So everything's petroleum-based, right? That's why you're rich.
Exactly.
Okay, so shrink wrap. So is that for food packaging or wrapping?
Anything,
Italians
right? So it's
wrapping
essentially
dead
the same
bodies?
thing. And so anything that comes in a container, basically anything gets transported overseas or
That's just petroleum.
is
See-through petroleum.
wrapped in, plastic wrap. Mm-hmm. And so we invested in a company out of Melbourne, Australia, believe it or not, called Great Wrap.
I'm in this.
Yeah, which is making a fully biodegradable pallet wrap out of potato waste that is not only at performance parity, but at price parity. And their biggest investor is the largest grocery chain in Australia.
So it's no petroleum or less petroleum?
No petroleum.
And it's just potato. And no one knows potatoes like the Coopers. Does that make sense to you because you knew everything about potatoes?
No, it kind of... I had this thesis on the future of packaging. And the problem with a lot of these packaging companies is twofold. I've probably spoken to 50 different companies over the past year. They're either science projects where they say, hey, we have this incredible idea.
That wouldn't scale.
We're creating a bioplastic or biopolymer. It's 5 to 6 years away from commercial viability, if ever.
And no one wants that.
Right? And nobody wants that. And I'm okay betting on execution risk or market risk, right? But betting on both of those is when it becomes a scary proposition. Or, hey, we have a solution, but it's 4, 5, 12 times the price. Right? And these massive companies only care about, the future of packaging until it affects their bottom line. And so
they won't do that.
If you don't have something that's near price parity or line of sight to price parity, nobody cares.
And so potato waste, just Americans have a lot of potato waste?
So there's a massive, I think the fact is 15 to 20% of post-production, so like when you turn potatoes into French fries, just gets thrown out.
So McDonald's is the biggest waste producer?
Not directly, but there's a Simplot, there's a bunch of, and so they're figuring out...
Oh, the people who cut it.
People who cut the
McDonald's.
potatoes, right? How do we figure out how to...
Cut those deals with Simplot?
Or, there's a few other companies. How do we figure out how to take sort of the agricultural by-waste of creating, French fries or veggie noodles or whatever it is, and create a different product out of it? So there's a lot of different companies that are using these agricultural waste streams to create bioplastics or other use cases.
And that plastic then does it look like the plastic?
You
Wouldn't know.
would have absolutely no idea. And the trials they've done, like it's a one-to-one solution.
I like French fries. What if I was standing next to it? Would I have an urge to eat? But I say, well, I don't understand why. I just feel like gorging myself on this plastic. No,
you'd have absolutely. You probably could
eat it.
You wouldn't want to, but it would, decompose. And so that, packaging alone, $1 trillion industry. You look at logistics. Another area is ingredients, right? So before the war in Europe, nobody knew that 40% of Europe's wheat came from Ukraine. And now everyone considers themselves a global wheat expert, right? There are
on Twitter.
Yeah.
Not everyone.
There are other ingredients, in my opinion, that come from more war-torn countries, crazier corners of the earth that are subject to supply shock, climate change, deforestation, child labor, you name it, that are, more at risk. Cocoa and coffee being two of those, right? And so we invested in a company out of Israel alongside, one of the top 3 chocolate sellers in the world. And they're using cell cultures to make cocoa derivatives, not as a consumer product, but as a B2B ingredient in, reactors at scale.
Huh. So how do you decide? So for you, is it just common? So you look at, will the manufacturers, it's got to be price is first.
Yeah,
you
it has to
triple
be
the price
near price parity, right? Because no one's going to pay $14 for a chocolate bar.
And is that you just going to your LPs in your network and just saying, does this make sense?
Yeah, so we've got really unique relationships with global strategics, right? And LPs who own really big businesses or are massive farmers or huge logistics companies. And I say, hey, what are the problems you're trying to solve? What are your 2023, 2030 sort of target goals? And what are the issues that you haven't solved so far? Yeah. Right, let's go find a solution together.
Yeah. And for people that think that like all tech moves together, this is kind of tech.
Yeah.
But this is where tech becomes the sauce, not the everything.
100%. And, they're...
So VC can be non-tech, even though this is tech, it's tech adjacent.
Yeah. There are SaaS businesses, right, that support the farmers, the logistics companies, right? There are absolutely tech businesses that you would find interesting and social leverage would probably invest in that are in this world.
Yeah. We've done one. We did Produce Pay. We did Around the Edges. Now the Emerging Manager Fund is more about finding the nades, people that will pay a little extra fee because we're just not going to learn this, right? So we'd rather work with the nades than the actual founders and all these things because we just can't do the work. And we just can't be the best at what we do. Maybe we could be the best at picking the nates in the next crop, take what we've learned. Does that make sense, Knut?
It makes a lot of sense.
You're shaking your head. I don't know if it's like Howard's crazy.
No, I'm not shaking my head.
But that was our thinking as tech becomes, like, we don't want to be doing the same thing. I find it boring. That's why we're doing the podcast and now we're doing some video stuff is like to do the same stuff over, to play the same playbook is impossible. And I think food and beverage, I guess beverage too. And
Absolutely.
You did a popsicle as well. But...
We are early investors in OLIPOP.
And what's OLIPOP?
OLIPOP is a better-for-you soda that we invested in 4.5 years ago, pre-revenue. And that and Liquid Death are the 2 fastest-growing beverages in the world.
Oh, so we're competitors. Are we competitors or no?
No.
Note to himself. So should Liquid Death make an OLIPOP? What is an OLIPOP? What's the secret sauce?
So... I took a sip of this. OLIPOP.
Well, great name, OLIPOP. And what did that mean?
It's a low sugar, low calorie, high fiber soda, right? So you chase the cola, you close your eyes, you think you're drinking a Diet Coke, right? Their root beer is a clone of root beer. They just released a cherry cola.
That's like shit tasting like shit root beer growth.
They just released a cherry cola. They're about to release sort of a lemon lime Sprite.
And where are they distributing this? Everywhere?
Everywhere. Whole Foods, Fry's, Safeway, Target.
So what's the differentiator? It just seems like it's not packaging. Is it really the formula? Or is it all marketing and distribution?
So when I met these guys, 4.5 years ago, I took a sip.
Chicago?
I'm based in Oakland.
Okay.
I took a sip of this and said, I was like, wow, this is the first soda, analogous thing I've tasted that really fills that gap. And they had an incredible brand and product before they launched, which is kind of, in CPG,
it's harder than people think.
Yeah, when you have a A+ brand and product before you launch, like that's kind of the first step. There are obviously many other boxes you need to check. And they were kind of first to market, and there have been a bunch of copycats. You know, there's one that literally directly copied their name and tried to copy their flavors.
Wow.
Um,
So it's just like tech or
Nothing
any other
compares,
thing.
right? They have this proprietary IP of their formula, and I think their product is best in class. And, you know, whether you're a multimillionaire or living on food stamps, right? The vast majority of people realize that, you know, drinking 50 grams of sugar of soda a day isn't good for you. And
Right.
if you can fill it with something that tastes very similar and
Try
isn't
it.
as bad for you,
Do I order online or order Whole
yeah,
Foods or something?
I'll send you some.
Okay. So I got free OLIPOP. See? Not all
right.
bad. So that was when you were an angel investor?
Yeah, that was when we were an angel, and I wrote a small personal check. The funny story about that, I had the founder over for dinner. My wife, Ariel, who you've met. Guy walks in. She goes, "Oh, I made chicken." And one of the founders, David, is British. And David goes, "Oh, I'm vegan." She looks at me, she goes, "I'm going to kill you." And he left, and I go, "That was amazing." She goes, "That was gross. Please don't invest."
Oh,
And so
that happens.
now,
with Liquid
now she
Death,
loves it,
Yeah.
and I get to hold it above her all the time, but now she's a huge fan, so...
Yeah, in the house, when you bring products home like Liquid Death, we were divided. I was an investor because it was Mike Lazaro. It was a personal investment, and it was just like, I don't know, water in a can. I was betting on Mike is a wild man. And it divided the house. Now I forget who. One thought, Rachel or Max thought it was dumb. The other one thought it was genius.
By the way, Liquid Death is a perfect example of something we'd invest in, because when you look at bottled water, right? Bottled water didn't exist until probably 30, 40-ish years ago.
Oh, it was just tap?
Maybe it was even longer than that, but like, it was this innovation
Right.
that a lot of people didn't believe in. And it's not really an innovation. It's taking...
Really amazing that it is an innovation in a world that we complain about plastic. So it's
Exactly. And so
it's a while that it took Liquid Death. It does taste a little different.
Ethan and I were talking about bottled water, and, you know, this bottle 15 years ago had more plastic and a bigger cap.
Oh,
Right? And so these massive corporations are saying, "Oh, we're going to better the environment by using less plastic and shrinking the cap." This is still a forever plastic that is going to take
forever's forever.
forever to decompose in a landfill. And so Liquid Death, you know, aluminum is the most recyclable material in the
It's
world.
unbelievable. So it must taste different, and that's why people didn't do it, or they were just so used to form factor. He's a great marketer.
Look,
I
when you
haven't met the guy.
say, "Hey, we're going to sell water in a can, and this is going to be $1 billion idea," like, even now, that sounds like the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
But there's, you know, probably 5 or 6 copycats who are doing canned
Well,
water.
Dasani's doing it. It
Yeah.
looks ugly. No one's drinking it. I mean, I have to get it at the game, at the Suns game, because Dasani, probably Coke has a partnership. But so again, it's not just about water in a can. What Liquid Death has done is relentless
They have
pursuit. It's like Manscaped. You can't just have a good product and win.
They have
because
built an
OLIPOP,
incredible brand.
right? And you can't stop
Yeah.
because they're coming for you because it's just water in a can.
It's honestly, time and time again, all of their campaigns, it's some of the best things I see. You know, the skateboard with Tony Hawk's blood in it. It was brilliant.
I don't even know. I don't like really. So that's a Liquid Death. Yeah.
And they released a limited edition watch that had, you know, blood on the dial.
Yeah, that's real. I know they're doing a Arnold Palmer, like they're doing a iced tea lemonade. It's called Armless Palmer.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, like that's funny. It seems really dumb, but it's
It
funny
works.
in the name of their brand. And so you've got to keep going. Much like tech, like Zoom was the better product, and then Teams. So it happens in CPG, it happens in tech. Everything's clonable. Snapchat, Facebook, you know, the innovation, TikTok, but not everybody's going to have an algo. And while everybody develops their algo, TikTok's going to have to monetize and change how they actually treat their users, so everybody catches everybody.
Yeah, and you have to keep evolving, you know, whether it's SaaS or, you know, consumer tech. I mean, look at Uber, right? Uber came out, Lyft came out, and they didn't really create anything new. They were just creating an
They
easy...
actually copied UberX's Lyft.
Yeah,
really.
they created sort of something, an easier way to do something, to take a taxi or get a town car, right?
I actually spent, even though I only use Uber Eats once or twice a month, and for the highest end foods, they're making more money off me probably off Uber Eats than they ever would have
They're
on
making
Uber.
more money off of Uber Eats than they do off Uber.
And I'm happy about it.
And that was a secondary business to them.
Yeah. Really fascinating. Do you use Uber Eats, Knut?
No, I don't, but I use Uber, the regular one.
Yeah, I use Uber, but like Uber Eats means more to me. I trust it. Like it actually works, and the drivers seem happy. And it does, my son's ordering $9 burgers, so that makes no sense from like a McDonald's. But if you're going to order and get ripped off at Nobu, I'd rather eat it at home than in the restaurant.
When for the intro, what am I panicked about? My second thing that I was considering was getting old.
Yeah.
And like, this is an example of how I'm getting old. You just said a $9 burger from McDonald's, and like my heart skipped a beat. I'm like, shit, like what did those used to cost at McDonald's? Like, I'm like the guy who's saying,
I think they are still
$9
cheap,
at
but
McDonald's?
I think once you have GoPuff deliver them,
Yeah.
or Uber Eats, maybe they're an exclusive, it's probably $9 is what I'm saying. I'll see. Max, I don't know if your sons do it. Max is not embarrassed that I see how he spends his money. So he's still attached. Even though he could have his own bank account, he still keeps his account at Morgan Stanley because it just works. I see what he's eating. I'm petrified. I'm more petrified about how he's killing himself. So there was this period where I just kept saying, GoPuff, GoPuff, GoPuff. And I called him. I said, dude, you're going to smoke weed is one thing. But, like, can you just get your own bank account so your mom and I don't think that you're a fucking stoner? He goes, He goes, Dad, GoPuff's food delivery. It's not weed. So, and first of all, he's right. Second of all, he didn't care that we knew whether it was weed or not. So it's a whole
Well, it's legal in Arizona.
Well, it's not that it's legal. It's just he doesn't care that we're seeing his data. And we need to stop looking at it. But that's how we ate. We sat around and drank and ate. We didn't have money for, like, food. So, but, yeah.
I remember, when I didn't get a cell phone until I got a license. Right? And for, I think, the first year I had my license, I carried around my mom's old cell phone, extra cell phone, and I didn't want to put, girls' numbers in there, so I also carried around an index card with the girls' numbers that I got. And then I remember, that was the free nights and weekends days, and my parents would be like, oh, whose number is this? Why are you calling them all the time? Like, it's just a different world.
Yeah, it's a very different world. So on food, what excites you about food? Forget packaging. What excites you about food?
Yeah, so I think the ingredients play is a really interesting one. We have a couple investments there. I think the brand space today is hard because, this all goes in cycles.
You mean building a brand?
In building a brand, it all goes in cycles. Everything always does. But for the past 10 years, these massive strategics have just gone earlier and earlier. Right? And said, hey, where the
like a Kellogg or Procter & Gamble.
Where the threshold used to be, okay, if you reach $100 million in sales, it's interesting to a strategic, and then it became 50, and then it became 30, and then it became 20.
Then they started doing seed.
Right?
Coke was doing seed investment.
And now, time and time again, they just messed up these strategic acquisitions. And these massive corporates, unless they can build one of these brands to a platform where it's $300 million in sales or more, it doesn't really matter to them. And so there's all these brands that are at, 20, 30, 40, $50 million in sales that have spent a lot of money to get there.
And then there's nowhere to go?
And frankly, I think they might be worthless. And so I think
like Shopify problem.
There's going to be an opportunity for someone to raise a few $100 million and acquire these and create, the P&G or the Unilever of the future, because they're going to be able to buy these brands for cents on the dollar. I don't know when that is, but I think it's, within the next few years.
We're in that phase where it's turning over and people are just starting to put that money together. Yeah. I was saying to a fund in Aspen, I was like, you could go, and this is a free idea because I already gave it out, that has $500 million to put to work, and say, screw it, just go to Angel, call Naval, say, write a letter to all your rolling funds, and then we'll offer 20. You're never going to make your $5-10 million back for your LPs, right? We've done the math for you. Your wife's yelling at you. You should go get a job.
Yeah.
It's nobody's fault. Here's 10 cents on the dollar. Like, I can't go and do that to $25 million funds, but someone could go to Naval and just write what do you call it? Like a hostile letter.
A hostile takeover, yeah.
Of all of AngelList rolling funds. So the good news about having these platforms is someone can go do it. But I think, the era of, and I'm fascinated by brand building, as are you, but it's not easy.
No.
And now, but I like that it's not easy now, because now everybody realizes it's not easy. So now there's good people that can attack this, and it's not a simple, the blitz scaling and the growth hacking terms and the, buy your customer on Facebook. That's over.
I've had this conversation a lot.
Well, it never was real.
Yeah. I've had this conversation a lot with regards to brand building, and I think it's applicable to consumer products. I think it's applicable to tech, where there's two things that, acquirers want. They want a brand and they want a formula. And the formula is much easier to protect and harder to replicate than a brand, in my opinion. Because brands can be fads.
Well, brands can also be
Right.
wrecked by a tweet
Right, exactly. I
or
was
buying Twitter.
Yeah, I was talking to a guy today who was looking at a bracelet company that I don't even remember the name. It was a fad 4 years ago. It was a 50 million business 4 years ago, and now they're doing $6 million in sales because it was, the hottest thing at the time.
Yeah.
And they had no formula. They had, essentially a brand that people were excited about.
Yeah. And that's why I would say, like, Manscaped, Liquid Death, I don't count my money. I've been enjoying Manscaped. Is just unreal. I don't know Liquid Death close enough because I'm just a personal LP. But what is the protection? It's just water in a can. So when I saw Dasani, I'm like, oh, this is over. But like then I used Dasani. I'm like, this is a cheap imitation in the sense that they are hacking their way in. They're using their power to get the stadium. But kids don't want Dasani if they have a choice over Liquid Death.
I think Liquid Death is a really interesting use case, because Mike and team there, I don't know Mike, I am very envious of what he's built. They have done things that other people don't have the balls to.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they will lean into murder your thirst. Dasani's not going to go put the word murder on your
Same
can.
thing we're seeing with Manscaped.
Exactly.
It's like ball shaving. Everybody else is, they're scared to say it, So, but Paul, we've had Paul on, he's going to come on again, but where he just went with, he's doing the beer trimmer and he got John Daly. I don't know if you saw this. So
Yes,
John
I did
Daly
see
is the
that.
spokesman.
Yeah.
Genius.
Absolutely.
So you can't go wrong. Like, who's he going to offend? He's offended everyone, so he's offended no one.
Exactly.
So he's the perfect spokesman. Pete
Yeah.
Davidson offends everyone, therefore
Amazing.
offends no one.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's the skill that I don't think I have. I don't think you can build a fund just around brands.
No, and there are people who have, it's an interesting
Well,
conversation. to have
Forerunner
with you.
did it, and I don't know if you can continue to do it because the trick is different now because Facebook and Apple have closed the pipe. So it'll be more impressive if they could do it again.
But there are, talking about building a fund around brand, there are people on Twitter right now who are building funds purely
Well,
on
they're
their
building a fund
personal
on their
brand.
brand. I'm talking about building a
Yes.
fund backing like e-commerce brands.
100%.
That was like a thing, and I'm like, I don't
No.
think so.
I think the age of, investing in these D2C businesses, I wouldn't say it's over, but it is a vast, it's like Stone Age to the Middle Age. It is a different time period than it was.
It's just different. Yeah. All right, great. So, mainly Chicago, just here a little bit.
Yeah, I live in Chicago. I question myself all the time why I live
really do. I really can, I really do. I mean, as a kid growing up in Toronto, I loved Chicago. Felt like home, but like I don't get it.
there. I was bored today, and I was like, I got 45 minutes. I'm going to go on a 30-minute run through the mountains, right? Chicago, I got 45 minutes. I'm like, I'm going to go sit on my couch and probably fall asleep for an hour. It's just different.
Different lifestyle, and it feels outdated. And I knew people love their city. People love Chicago. They feel they can't leave. I don't know. I feel like they should leave. It feels sad at some level because it's cold and like windy and there's these big streets. Is downtown coming back?
Is downtown coming back? I don't live downtown. We moved right before COVID. We moved April 1st of 20 and bought our house in July of 19. Probably the best investment I'll ever make.
Mm-hmm. What are you hearing?
It's not as bad as people say.
Sure.
Right? It never is.
But who goes and fills all that in? Is it the next generation? What are the jobs? Like, why do people want to be downtown?
I think the young people are always going to be there, right? Mm-hmm. My generation, it was interesting because my generation, 5 years older, 5 years younger, in terms of the suburbs, we were kind of that missed generation, right? Nobody wanted to ever move to the suburbs and everyone was staying longer. When we were looking for houses, we would go look at streets, right? And there'd be 12 houses for sale on a single street. And now, COVID was the driver of it. Nobody wants to stay in the city, when they have kids, or very, very few people. I think it's all cyclical as everything is. I love the city of Chicago. I think it's always going to exist, and I think it's, I feel safe when I'm there, right? And if you don't do stupid things, if you're not walking on the street by yourself, at midnight, you're going to be fine.
No, but I'm just talking weather.
Yeah.
Lifestyle. Forgetting there's crime everywhere.
No, the weather is always going to exist.
Right, like I don't get it. And Chicago's like they're all here, but yet they go back.
Yeah.
I guess because they feel it's close and they can just get away.
It's the center of the country, right? You're never too far from anywhere.
But does Phoenix feel like to you, like is it the place that you would go if you had to leave? Would you go to Phoenix?
I would have to talk to my wife because
No, but I'm saying
she's a
if.
Florida person.
Oh,
yeah.
Florida. Well, that you.
I was never a Florida person.
Yeah.
I feel like you're either a mountains or an ocean guy.
Yeah.
I'm a mountains person. I could go, on a 5-hour hike by myself and not speak to a single person and be happy. So,
you go Tom Thumb?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Right.
It's such a great hike.
Very good. And so, what are your minimum check sizes? What do you write? 250, 500?
We write 250 to 750 first check-in.
Yep. So first check-in, you've got a food idea, manufacturing idea. You're already helping out a bunch of ASU kids that are hitting you up here. There's some cool stuff, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think about the youths? What do you think?
I think people are more ambitious than they've ever. I was talking to Ethan.
He's 20.
I didn't know what venture capital was when I was in college, right? Like, I didn't know this was a thing.
He's asking real questions.
Yeah, and the fact that kids are doing this and wanting to do this, I think makes it harder, right? Because there's going to be so much more competition as there always is, but it's awesome.
Yeah, and they're not just thinking about it as it's just tech anymore.
Now I'm panicked about getting old again.
Nah, 35 is prime. You don't start doing anything till you're 50, unless you inherited it. As you see, even if you have successful parents, the grind is the grind. At least you have a parent that can console you because they've taken risk. But you got to get your ass kicked.
Yeah.
I don't think you know what success is. You can't appreciate success until you've just had the rug pull. All right, this is fun. Nate Cooper, Barrel Ventures, Chicago. So thanks for joining us today for a second live interview. You are listening to Panic with Friends, where Howard, me, sits down with friends, family, wanted people, experts, venture capitalists, traders, trying to get a little bit in front of the future. And what I'm fascinated about food packaging is that these industries are enormous. Everybody's been focused on Web 2, and the world keeps humming along. And as like we said with Ukraine, we don't realize how important things are until they're taken away from us. So probably why the market is more resilient than we think. It's big out there. The money is rotating is all that's happening right now into things that actually matter, which is planet. So good for you, good for Barrel Ventures, good for me if Nate does well. And you can search my name, Howard Lindson, Spotify, Apple, Google. You'll see Panic with Friends. Subscribe, and you'll get one of these every week. Talk to everybody next week.
Howard Lindson is the founder and general partner at Social Leverage. All opinions expressed by Howard and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Social Leverage or StockTwits. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for decisions. Guests may maintain positions in securities discussed in this podcast.